Hello. Hi. Doing good. My mic is working. Yeah, it's been a while since I last did any streams. I was too busy. Yeah, speaking of NST, I was fortunate to be one of the helpers for this tournament, the National Interschool Team Chess Championships Online 2021. And I did come across a couple of very interesting games from the NUS chess team, the U20 category, and that's why I decided to analyze a couple of them today. The first game that we will be looking at is by Eat This, that's Giant from the NUS chess team playing on board 4, and he's taking the white pieces for this game. So he starts off with a very typical Sicilian defense, and this is the open Sicilian, but I think many of you would be very familiar with all this, and now we have a very vintage Sicilian line-off appearing on the board. White goes for the classic, I think that's called the English attack. Yep. And E5 is a very it's gaining a lot of popularity in recent days. You see it very often in a lot of high level tournaments. I mean, some of the other more classic moves that used to be played was E6, right? And then after that, there's the Bishop G5, Bishop E7, those main lines. Yeah, but E6 also leads to a lot of interesting kingside attacks on opposite sides of the board, and so on and so forth. So yeah, E5 is a more modern take, I think. Just trying to strike out straight in the center, gain control over this, and eventually you want to push E5 later on. Of course, black will need to be careful not to let this D6 pawn become a weakness. It's what white would try to do. Knight to B3, knight to D7, and F3. Okay, we see this a lot in a lot of Sicilian games, right? Both to stop this knight from coming here and also to support G4 later on. The E7, Queen to D2, Queen to C7. And as we see, yeah, this is very, very classic Sicilian play where after G4, you see that both sides are just attacking on both sides of the board. With B5 coming up, G4, so there's going to be H4, H5, and G5, and black needs to do something about this. Right? Bishop to B7, okay, good move. Knight to B6 could have been considered, and maybe put the bishop here, but I think bishop to B7 is perfectly playable as well. Eventually, you want things like into C8, minority attack, knight to B6, and possibly put a knight here. Right. A3, to discourage this. I think if they went through with like G5 and A3, I think this will be absolute hell. I'm not going to go through this variation. It's going to involve a lot of calculation for sure. Right. And now rook to C. And after A3, then goes rook to C8. Now I felt that knight to B6 could have been worth considering. Of course, the idea here is that since you can't play this immediately, why not you just keep the pawn here and then you look at the c4 square, right? Especially since white is playing knight to b3, you can't really kick the knight away. So let's say, for example, something like let's say h4 here, and if you take, then actually black will be very happy because you can either capture here with tempo and then you open up this file, and I think life is pretty good for black. Or I think this is playable as well, but not as effective. I think I'd rather the rook here. So possibly, possibly pawn takes. That's what I'll play if I were black. But anyway, knight to b6 wasn't played. Instead, rook to c8, which is a very sensible move as well. But I think I would have preferred knight to b6. And now white really goes for h4. Right. Now the idea is that g4, and where's this knight gonna go? It's really hard to find a place. Right, possibly he has to go back. Or maybe a castle and try to go here. And actually that's one of the reasons why I also want knight to b6, because eventually if g4 appears on the board, then the knight can at least reroute over to the queen side where it's doing something useful. Right. Anyway, h4 played. Black goes h5. Okay. My opinion is that if white goes on this, I think already white is starting to be a bit better over here, especially with the open g file. It's not really isn't doing much. Right. But anyway, white goes for g5, knight to h7. And now I'm starting to get a bit worried for black, because now white has a lot of potential tempo. A lot of tempo gaining moves like bishop a3, f4. This is going to come in, and so if you just look at the board, you go and calculate out the moves. I do think that any attack that white is able to launch on the king side is going to be faster than black's counterplay on the queen side. Anyway, the game continues. Rook to g1. A bit surprising. I mean, I would prefer bishop to h3, but yeah, g1 makes sense too. g6. Okay, this is a good move, because now you will stop any ideas of this. But there is a catch. Need to be careful, because if let's say f4, f5, and there's going to be a hook over here, and that's going to be in a lot of trouble. And that's precisely what white plays, f4. Right. So what is black going to do? Do you take, or do you not? Remember that if you take, there's going to be this potential weakness over here. And actually black takes, which I feel is one of the critical mistakes of this game. Because after bishop takes f4, now the question is, how are you going to hold on to this? Really very hard. I remember I said at the start of this live stream that usually black wants to push d6, d5. White wants to pressure on this, and now white is getting exactly what they want. Right now they have a lot of pressure here. I think instead of taking, black should just let it stay there. If let's say you play something like this and then you take, I think this black is doing perfectly alright here. Right. So I think white wouldn't do that. I think white will push to try and blow open this. And it's still very complicated. I still think white is better here, but the game definitely goes on. Black can definitely play on in this position, because that at least is still some counterplay on this side of the board. Anyway, we're going back to the position after f4. I goes for e takes f4. Bishop takes f4, and now there's really no good way to hold on to this pawn. So the knight f8, desperately trying to reroute the knight. White just picks up the free pawn, and actually after here it's just winning for white. Upper pawn. There's really no compensation to speak of. Right. I mean, black manages to free up the knight to get some counterplay, but I think white for the rest of this game, white just displayed the white basically just convincingly showed that he was able to convert this. So after knight to e6, bishop to a3, and a few more trades. Winning another pawn, and I think after this, white is just completely won. Right. F1 is coming, and just gonna get over this file, and black can pretty much resign over here. Black didn't resign. I think they played on for about 10 more moves, but yeah, I think by this stage it was pretty much decided. Right. Okay, so that's the first game that I wanted to look at. And the second game that I wanted to look at for today is also by a member of the NS chess team, TLDUS 399. That's I think that's Udit Sangi from playing on board one for NUS. Right. Okay, so Udit is taking the black pieces here, and the game opens up with what looks like a French defense. No, that's not the exchange French because White hasn't played d4 yet. Okay, fine. White plays d4, so it is the exchange. And I know a lot of people grab about exchange very symmetrical, but yeah, black immediately breaks the symmetry, and they on top this very interesting position with the knight on e7. I mean, normally you will see the bishop come out first, then knight goes to f6, but I think this is perfectly playable. Right, h3, very standard. F5, so black is very happy because normally in the French defense, this bishop is typically a bad bishop, but yeah, it's now the diagonal is open for him. And now white goes bishop to g5. And I'm not a big fan of this move. Yeah, you pin it, you pin the knight, but I can easily drive you away with f6. And that's why a lot of this, you need to read the position correctly and you need to understand the placement of these pieces if you want to play moves like this. Normally bishop to g5 is good because the knight is on f6. Right, so you can't really chase it away unless you play h6 and so on. But here, yeah, knight to e7, you can just very easily break the pin, and not only that, you can actually gain a tempo on this bishop. Just play f6, and then if you're feeling very adventurous, you just play g5, play h5 later on, and you just start a kingside attack. So really, bishop g5 is just giving black the potential to gain a lot of tempo later on. Right. So anyway, the game goes on. Queen e7, knight to c3, and queenside castling. So already you see, I think black has pretty much announced his intentions over here. So for those who are guessing, he's going to play f6, he's going to play g5, and start attacking on this wing. Right? It's really quite obvious. And when you see your opponent having this kind of plans, you don't just you need to strike back very actively. Right? And here, what white castle, which is a mistake. Right? What white should have done is to play knight e5, fighting the position of this queen, getting tempo of this knight. And let's say after queen to e6 is possible as well, but you just I mean this bishop is in a very awkward position. Yeah. So I wouldn't really play it. As after queen to e8, I think white can just safely castle, and you can just yeah, I think you can just either bring the bishop back or you just trade here. And then the game goes on. Yeah. Right, so knight to e5 should have been played. Just gain a bit of tempo. Right. Yeah. Yep. Bishop e7 is playable also, but I don't really like it because queen e7 you just gain extra tempo. Now to queen e2 to e8, and you're in a bit of trouble. So wouldn't really play that. I think another move here for white would be bishop to e3. Because it's a bit quieter, but I think white here, let's say black goes f6 and g5, then at least white still has some ideas of knight to a4, looking at c4, and potentially starting their own queenside attack. So definitely very playable. 95 bishop to e3. Right? But instead, yeah, like I said earlier, white castled. And now black goes for their plan. f6. Bishop f4. Normally this is a good move to place a bishop here, but here it is terrible because it just gain more. Black just gains more tempo with g5. And after bishop to h2, h5. Yeah, white is black has just too much tempo on the king side for white to respond effectively. I mean, any form of counter attack on the other side of the wing, like a4, it's going to be too slow. Right? Yeah, that's going to blow open if, especially with the hook here on h3. Bishop to d3, that's a good try, trying to trade off some of the pieces, but black just continues on with the attack. Yeah, they're perfectly okay with trading off this piece because that brings another attacker into the fray. Right. After h takes, now this queen is going to go over, threatens to occupy this file. His pawn, pawn removes the sole defender of this piece, so it's going to be very dangerous. And yes, you can see that exactly being played. So, how are you going to hold on to this? And if you go, it's going to be made here. In fact, I will say that white is just completely lost here. Right. f4, yeah, there was just complete desperation, but right, that just wins a piece after after a few more moves. Yeah, after a few more moves, white pretty much just gets mated over here. Very interesting mate in the middle of the board. See the majority of white's pieces are taking part, but quite interesting that this bishop hasn't even developed. Like white is already mated. Right. Right. So really interesting game, and that's pretty much the two games that I have to show for today. And yeah, you can see that from both games, very interesting kingside attacks conducted by the winner, and because of a couple of inaccuracies by the opponent, then it ended up that the attack was just too strong and too fast to, to be defended against. Right. Okay. Yep. So that's it for today, and for those of you who have been watching, thank you very much. Yeah, I'll probably try to go back to more Gastilos, more. I think I might do another series on my. I might do another game analysis on the isolated pawn because I've been reading up a couple more games on that team. So do stay tuned for that. Right. So thanks for watching.